Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Viper Phase 1. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Saibu Kaihatsu, Viper Phase 1 originally released to arcades in 1995. This one's a little more obscure as it never received any home console ports back in the day. Now jump to December of 2024 and it's available as an arcade archive for the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're playing today. This title is a spin-off of the Raiden series, and as it's a more obscure title, I wasn't familiar with it, so I'm really happy to have the opportunity to play it. It's one I recommend as it has great performance, incredible sprite work, a great soundtrack, and compelling scoring. Everything you'd want from a mid-90s vertical scroller. Before we dive into the game itself, let's take a quick look at what's included in this Arcade Archive release. There were two versions of the title originally released back in 1995. So there's the original version, which is referred to as Old Version here, and then New Version, which came out several months later. There are a fair number of differences that make the two games feel almost like different games, so it's great that they're both included here. In addition to that, we also have the high score mode and the caravan mode, which allow you to play in either version for those particular high scoring modes, which is awesome as I mentioned, this game has a lot of compelling score attack potential. For our purposes today though, we will be showing the game off as the new version mode, as it's the one that I've enjoyed a little more. There is a lot to like about the old version as well. Starting up the new version, once we add credits to the machine, you can see that it supports 1 or 2 players. This is simultaneous, so we will be showing the game off as a co-op experience. Starting the game, we're dropped right into the action. So this is a vertical scroller, but there is some left and right movement to the screen. When you're playing 2-player, there will be some pulling of the screen, but unlike some vertical scrollers, at least it's not actually pulling the character with you. Although there will be situations in a co-op experience where you might move enemies on to the side of the screen that could potentially be a danger to your partner, so do keep that in mind. As far as what we have from a weapon standpoint, so you've got your primary shot and then a bomb, which is kind of typical of the bombs that you would have in the earlier releases in the Raiden series. A nice big kind of like explosion style nuke. However, there are a couple things to note about that bomb. It only clears enemy bullets in its immediate area of influence, and you aren't invulnerable when you use it, so you do have to be careful with that particular, with those particular caveats in mind, as it does make it for a more difficult experience. So in addition to our main shot, you can pick up one of 4 different secondary weapons. So there's the W shot, which is your wide Vulcan that basically adds some spread to your shot. Then we have the L, which is a kind of typical Raiden series laser. There's also the M, which is a barrage missile, and lastly we have the N, which is your napalm missile. They're all a lot of fun to use, but if I were to go and pick which ones are my favorite, definitely the 2 missiles, either the main missile itself or the napalm, are the ones that I'm usually enjoy using the most. And as you can see here, that's part of the reason why the napalm is so fun to use. Just lots of explosions going off on the enemies, and well, with the bombs themselves, we can make quick work of the first boss, and that's the first stage cleared. So once you complete a stage, you have your tally of how many enemies you've destroyed, how many bombs you have left, as well as the medals you collected, and then, very important, the percent destroyed, which gives the score of the other entries for that those bonuses a multiplier, and then that score is added up, and that is your score for the stage. Because the multiplier is there, there's actually huge potential for like massive differences in score based off of how well you performed on destroying the enemies throughout a stage. So that's what makes this one such a compelling score attack. In addition to that, when you're playing the new version, it's significantly easier to get the medals in the stage that drop from, well, the enemies that you destroy on the ground, as well as these capsules that come from the top of the screen. And there are also some other stages that have other ways to get a lot of medals later on in the game as well. One thing that's to note about those capsules, the capsules that come from the top of the screen that you can shoot for medals, are also, if you let them come down to the midpoint of the screen, then they'll eventually start to exit the screen through the top. If you destroy them closer to the top of the screen while they're exiting, you will drop even more medals. That's yet another way you can increase the score attack potential of the game. So as I mentioned, this one's very compelling to practice and aim for high scores. In addition to that, so the game is spread over a total of 8 stages, and there's never a loading screen or really a break in the scrolling. After you defeat a boss, it just scrolls into the next stage. And each stage is full of unique, really interesting ship designs. The boss fights themselves also are all unique and different, and some of them are even kind of like surprising in just the way that you're introduced to the boss itself. So all of this just adds up for a really excellent shoot 'em up that I was very surprised to encounter, as I was unfamiliar with this one. Having the chance to try it out and play this one, it was a real treat. I was like, oh, that's a game that's a Raiden series spin-off, and then playing it and it's like, this is really, really good. So that's why this one comes across as a solid recommend from the chef. There are a couple issues that I've had with the game. So namely, the smaller bullets that the enemies fire are that they do travel fast, so it's like less that problem and more the issue that they're relatively small in size, and especially in some of the stages with the backgrounds and your own shots, it's easy to go and lose the enemy shots and kind of be surprised when you end up taking damage. So there's that. Coupled with that, the hitbox is actually fairly large for your fighter, so you do have to get used to what the size of your hitbox is, as well as learning how to see those enemy bullets. But on the plus flavors, I love all the sprite work that the game has. As I mentioned, it has such a variety of enemies. You see quite a bit of that throughout the course of the stage as things move on. The larger enemies in particular, when you destroy them, are a real treat, as you'll see them kind of break up in a really dynamic and interesting way that kind of feels like appropriate for destroying larger cap ships in space. Then that final game scoring, as I mentioned, really does do a great job of setting this one apart for a score attack title. And lastly, the game itself just has a great feel to it. Even with 2 players, it never misses a beat. There's not really any slowdown, and actually as a co-op experience, the game becomes even more interesting, as it doesn't just throw the same enemies at you, but you'll encounter more enemies and different patterns of enemies when you play the game as a co-op experience. So if you're used to the patterns and the way that the game flows as a single player experience, if you play a co-op, it'll be yet again something different to sit down and try. So if you have the chance to, then I'd recommend kind of playing it both ways, as it's great to go and see just the way that the game like this can develop and change when you just add yet another player into the mix for the mechanics. And with all those plus flavors combined, this one comes across as a solid recommend from the chef. And with that, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.